Both were young phenoms burdened with impossible expectations.
People have called LeBron James the next Michael Jordan.
This is a different Lou Alcindor than the one they controlled in the Astrodome.
Both were drafted first overall by struggling franchises and transformed them into championship contenders.
Time to celebrate a title.
They won 3 consecutive national championships.
Both eventually arrived in Los Angeles, became the face of the Lakers, and defined an era of their own.
LeBron! Here's Kareem going to work now. They need some offense from Kareem.
Their journeys unfolded decades apart, but again and again, LeBron seemed to follow the same path Kareem had walked before him. So when LeBron rose over the defense, buried the shot, and became the NBA's all-time leading scorer, Kareem was not simply giving him the basketball. He was passing the torch to the one man whose journey had mirrored his own from the very beginning. Kareem had already walked every step of LeBron's road, decades ahead of him. He was anointed as a boy the same way.
High school basketball in New York is a blood sport. It's a serious game. I had offers to go to high school and not have to pay tuition. So at that point, basketball started paying some bills.
He was resented for his greatness the same way. And when he finally used his voice, he was punished for it the same way, then spent years trying to warn the world about exactly what it does to a black athlete who becomes too dominant and then dares to think out loud. A huge part of the country waved him off, called him difficult and ungrateful, and told him to go back to playing basketball. Then LeBron came along and lived that identical story all over again, beat for beat, and proved every word of the warning true. That is what this video is really about, not who scored more or who wins one-on-one. It is about how two men, born 37 years apart, ended up on the same road, facing the same forces, hearing the same 3 words hurled at them across 2 different centuries. Lay their lives side by side and they stop looking like 2 careers. They start to look like one story told twice. And by the time we reach the end, that quiet handoff at center court is going to feel less like a ceremony and more like a prophecy coming true in real time. Which means that to understand LeBron, you first have to go back and meet the young man who lived it all before him. Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr. was born in Harlem in April of 1947, and from an almost impossibly young age, it was obvious that his body had been built for a game that had barely figured out what to do with someone like him.
I first stepped on the basketball court at PS 52 in Upper Manhattan, and then would struggle just getting the ball up to the rim level. I couldn't do it at first. 8th grade, I dunked a ball in the game. That was pretty amazing in those days.
By the time he reached Power Memorial Academy in New York City, he was already a phenomenon. A teenage giant drawing crowds and reporters to high school gymnasiums.
Holy Providence School, I learned some tough lessons there. The other kids didn't appreciate the fact that I was a good student, and I was kind of singled out as an egghead nerd kind of person.
No big man has ever dominated the sport in the Alcindor manner.
This guy was so superior to every opponent he ever played against that every player growing up wanted to be like Lou Alcindor.
College coaches courted him like royalty. The weight of a nation's expectations settled onto a kid who was still learning who he was. Now hold that image in your mind, because roughly 4 decades later, it repeats almost frame for frame. In February of 2002, a magazine cover appeared on newsstands across America. Sports Illustrated, the most important sports publication in the country, put a 17-year-old high school junior on its cover and branded him with 2 words that would follow him for the rest of his life. The Chosen One.
Obviously, the Chosen One, here we go. This is it. You're in Cleveland. You immediately start getting compared to, like, greatest of all time.
I was like, I'm 17 years old. What the hell is this?
His name was LeBron James, and he played for St. Vincent St. Mary in Akron, Ohio. His high school games were pulled onto national television, an unheard of thing for a teenager. Grown men debated whether he was already good enough to walk straight into the professional ranks. Scouts and executives and shoe companies circled a child who had not yet graduated. 2 kids nearly 4 decades apart handed a burden almost no human being should ever have to carry. Both of them were expected to be men before they were allowed to be boys.
I was like, oh shit, if I commit to this, I can figure it out. I can figure it out for not only myself, but for my mom, get out of the inner city and make something out of it.
I was 14 years old and not very mature. I had to leave that childish emotion and self-pity behind and learn how to compete and and get with it.
Both of them learned early that the applause came with strings attached, that the country building them up was also measuring them, sizing them for a role, deciding in advance what they were permitted to be. Same anointing, same age, same trap dressed up as a gift. That premature coronation is where their stories begin to run in parallel, and it is nowhere near where they stop. Being anointed early was the gentle part of the story. The real trouble started once both of them got good. Not good in a way anyone could manage or contain, but good in a way that broke the machinery of the sport itself and forced the people who ran it to react. Watch closely how each institution responds, because the two responses are nearly identical, and they are the first hard proof that we are not looking at a coincidence here. Consider what happened to Lou Alcindor at UCLA. He arrived in Westwood and immediately made a mockery of college basketball.
Down it goes to Alcindor, and Lou just can't be stopped.
You could just literally go to him every time and just throw the ball up anywhere 11 feet or so above the rim, and he would go and get it and be a score.
Always a huge scoring threat, the 7-1 UCLA center dominates a game in other ways.
His team went 88-2 across his 3 varsity seasons and won a national championship every single year he was eligible to play. He was simply unstoppable around the rim, catching the ball and dunking it over anyone foolish enough to stand in front of him. And the response from the sport's governing body was extraordinary. In March of 1967, just 3 days after Alcindor led UCLA to a national title, the men who ran college basketball voted to ban the dunk, outlawed it.
You know how they used to tell Lou Alcindor at the time that he couldn't dunk in high school games? Yeah. They would have told Kyrie, you're not allowed to dribble anymore. That's what they would have told him.
Erased one of the most exciting plays in the game from the college ranks, and it stayed banned for roughly a decade. Officially, they offered technical justifications about defense and safety, but everyone understood the truth. The rule existed to solve a single problem, and that problem had a name. Sports writers of the era openly called it the Lou Alcindor rule. An entire sport rewrote its own laws to diminish one black teenager who was too dominant to be beaten fairly. Alcindor saw exactly what it was. He said plainly that the new no-dunk rule carried the smell of discrimination, and he pointed out the obvious that most of the players doing the dunking were black. He was right, and he refused to pretend otherwise. So he adapted.
That sky hook, and you know it's coming. You know what he's going to do. You know, he's going to give you a little shoulder or whatever, but he's going to that sky hook. And I don't know if there's ever a play or a shot in the history of the game that scored 1 as many points, and 2 was just, you couldn't guard. You couldn't guard it.
It's the most unguardable shot weapon that ever been created. And I think why it's the greatest and most untouchable shot is because normally you get other guys that either try it and perfect it even more, or you got guys that just emulate it and do it as well, like the guys before them. There's never been nobody else that's ever even come close to even trying to.
He developed a shot that no rule could touch, an elegant, unblockable hook launched from high above his head, and he used that sky hook to keep right on dominating.
Sends it to Kareem. Sky hook up and good. Lakers win. Score it. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has given the Los Angeles Lakers a victory.
All right, Kareem, great shot. What a sky hook, baby.
Thank you very much. What can I say? Allahu Akbar.
All the way through 2 more championships and then 2 decades as a professional. They changed the rules to stop him. He beat the rules anyway, but he never forgot what the attempt had revealed about how the game felt about him. The parallel did not fade when they turned professional, it sharpened. Each entered the league as the most hyped prospect anyone had ever seen, each taken first overall, Alcindor by Milwaukee in 1969 and James by Cleveland in 2003.
Look at the Bucks have going for them. You're doing so well in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say teamwork.
I'm an American. Afro-Americans have been here since the inception of this whole society.
As soon as you get in the NBA, obviously the chosen one, here we go, this is it, you're in Cleveland. You immediately start getting compared to like greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And each was handed the identical impossible assignment. Take a losing, forgotten franchise in a city starved for a winner and drag it to the top almost single-handedly. Both of them did exactly that. Alcindor delivered Milwaukee a championship in only his second season.
No, we weren't all together today. We were missing some offensive players. He just came right in, made the big play.
The ease in which we did it, we won 4 straight from the Bullets, and it's very rare that happens in championship play. I was very proud of that.
James eventually brought Cleveland the title it had been waiting half a century for.
Second, 4, 3, James scores with 2. One of the great performances of all time in playoff history, authored by LeBron James.
Same role, same weight, same result, a generation apart. LeBron's version of the Containment story looks different on the surface because nobody could pass a rule to ban his particular gifts. You cannot legislate away a 250-pound man who moves like a guard and sees the floor like a chess master.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'9".
And how heavy are you?
I'm give or take in between 215 to 280. I don't know. It depends on the day. My mind is just like I can play the game because I can outthink the guys out there. And as my athleticism has went down a notch, I'm able to still bring up other facets of my game.
But the impulse, the deep discomfort with a black athlete who becomes too big to control, found other outlets. It came through the narrative machine instead of the rule book. Think about the summer of 2010 when LeBron decided to leave Cleveland and announce it on television. The reaction was not simply disappointment, it was rage.
Him going down to Miami, jumping on the bandwagon of D. Wade and Chris Bosh, that's great. It's going to be great basketball to see. But for me personally, I would love to see him win a championship and stay in Cleveland.
On the summer of 2010, he announces he's taking his talents to South Beach. It enrages Dan Gilbert. A few months later, we have a situation where we have a collective bargaining negotiation that's taking place. In that collective bargaining negotiations, Dan Gilbert is dogged.
Jerseys burned in the streets. A grown man who owned an NBA team wrote a furious public letter in a childish font. Overnight, the golden boy who had carried a struggling franchise for 7 years was recast as a villain.
The decision, it was brought to me to be able to, do something cool on TV. And the funniest thing is, from that moment, it was December 2nd, 2010 was my first game back to Cleveland. The elevator opens, and it's 2 guys, random guys on the elevator. They used to have these FUK LBJ t-shirts.
A traitor, an arrogant ingrate who had gotten too comfortable with his own power. The adoration flipped to venom almost instantly, and the speed of that flip told you everything about how conditional the love had always been. The country adored LeBron as long as he stayed in the box it had built for him. The moment he stepped out and exercised control over his own career, over his own life, a large part of America turned on him with a viciousness that had nothing to do with basketball. That is the same instinct that banned the dunk in 1967. It just wore a different costume. When a black superstar grows powerful enough to shape the terms of his own story, the culture reaches for a way to cut him back down.
When you know you have the vision and you start to realize the power that you possess, and now you know you could tap into these resources, you become unstoppable.
Sometimes it is a rule. Sometimes it is a narrative. The target is always the same.
There was too many years went by when players did not have an opportunity to just speak and their voices to be heard, or allow the narrative to get so much outside of sports. People in the media have gotten too comfortable, especially with our sport.
Now we reach the center of the whole thing, the place where these 2 lives lock together so tightly it stops being eerie and starts being undeniable. Dominance was never what put either man in real danger. Speaking was. And what happened to each of them the moment they opened their mouths is almost word for word the same. Rewind to June 4th, 1967. In a modest office building in Cleveland, some of the most famous black athletes in America gathered around a table in support of Muhammad Ali.
9 top Negro athletes meet with Cassius Clay to discuss his anti-draft stand. They include Bill Russell, Lou Alcindor, and former pro footballer Jimmy Brown. Says Brown after the meeting, the champ is sincere in his religious beliefs. He believes in his religion, and his stand is based wholly on that.
Who had just refused induction into the military during the Vietnam War, and was about to be stripped of his heavyweight title and hauled toward prison for it. Jim Brown was there. Bill Russell was there. And at the far end of the table, the youngest man in the entire room, barely 20 years old, sat Lou Alcindor. He was still a college student. He had everything to lose and no obligation to be there. He showed up anyway, and he lent his name and his growing fame to a man the American public despised at that moment, because he believed Ali was right. The Cleveland Summit was not a one-time gesture. The very next year, when he could have chased Olympic glory in Mexico City, Alcindor walked away from it. He boycotted the 1968 Games as a protest against the treatment of Black Americans at home.
I declined the invitation to go to the Olympics because I didn't feel that the Olympics situation was reality. Here we have this whole appearance of racial harmony on the American Olympic team when things weren't that harmonious here.
I would also like to commend the outstanding athletes who have the courage and the kind of determination to make it clear that they will not participate in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City unless something is done about these terrible problems, these terrible evils and injustices.
He decided he could not put on the national uniform and help broadcast a flattering image of a country to the world, while that same country treated people who looked like him as less than fully human. It was a principled stand, and the cost was immediate and brutal. He was hit with a firestorm of criticism, a flood of racial abuse, and even death threats.
I took a lot of heat for that, but I had good reasons not to go. I thought it would be better if I didn't go, as opposed to going and being a problem for everybody and being a disruptive element.
I did support the concept of a boycott because the Olympics is most definitely a political, semi-political event. If it were not political, they wouldn't have any national flags up. I'm very proud of Tommy Smith and John Carlos and those guys for taking the stand that they did. They suffered for it. They paid for it.
In a televised interview, he was essentially told that if he felt that way, perhaps America was not the place for him. Perhaps he should simply leave. Sit with that for a moment. A 21-year-old was told to get out of his own country because he pointed at an injustice everyone could see. And then, a few years later, he made a decision that alienated even more of the public. He embraced Islam and changed his name from the one his family had carried to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I had been a Muslim for something like 3 years before I changed my name. I didn't change it just to be changing it. I changed it when I realized that this is who I was and what I was about, and that my faith had the most important meaning to me.
To a huge segment of the country, that was betrayal. He was surrendering the name they knew, rejecting the identity they had assigned him, insisting on defining himself on his own terms. His popularity took a real hit, and it never fully recovered during his playing days. He was labeled cold, aloof, prickly, hard to like.
You know, I spent all my professional life in the public, and more or less I've become like public property, and kind of need some time to yourself just to keep things in perspective, and you just have to have it.
The most accomplished center the game had ever seen spent his prime being told, in 100 different ways, that he would be a lot more beloved if he would just smile, stay quiet, and play. Now, fast forward, and watch history refuse to learn a single thing. LeBron James grew up, won championships, became the face of the entire league, and then he did the thing that Kareem had done before him. He started to speak. When Trayvon Martin was killed, LeBron and his Miami teammates posed together in hooded sweatshirts, heads bowed, a silent statement seen around the world.
A show of support flagged by the Miami Heat. LeBron James tweeted a photo of himself and his teammates wearing team-logoed hoodies in honor of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old boy who was shot and killed last month by a neighborhood watch guard in Sanford, Florida. The Heat organization released a statement which reads in part, quote, "We support our players and join them in hoping that their images and our logo can be part of the national dialogue and can help our nation's healing."
When Eric Garner died, LeBron pulled a shirt over his jersey bearing the words the man had gasped before he stopped breathing.
Tonight, Cleveland Cavaliers forward LeBron James wore a shirt saying, "I can't breathe." If you're in an arena where people have paid money to come and see you, and you're working for a team.
But in and of itself, for a celebrity to use the platform to make a case, that's perfectly fine.
He opened an actual public school in his hometown of Akron in 2018, built for the at-risk children most likely to be written off before they ever got started.
As a kid from Akron, Ohio myself, I remember walking these same streets. So when people ask me why a school, that's part of the reason why, because I know exactly what these 240 kids are going through. I know the streets that they walk. I know the trials and tribulations that they go through.
And he backed it with his own fortune and his own name, and a promise to see those kids all the way through. In 2020, in the middle of a national reckoning, he gathered other athletes and entertainers into a coalition aimed squarely at protecting the right of Black Americans to vote, fighting voter suppression, and turning arenas into polling places. He used the largest platform any athlete has ever commanded to point at the things he believed were broken. And even the charity, even the school, even the voter drives could not escape the accusation. There were always voices insisting he should have kept it to basketball, that a man in his position had no business wading into any of it, that gratitude required silence. And America responded to LeBron exactly the way it had responded to Kareem. It told him to shut up. In February of 2018, after LeBron criticized the sitting president in an interview, a prominent cable news host went on the air and delivered a line that will outlive her.
This is barely intelligible, not to mention ungrammatical take on President Trump. It's always unwise to seek political advice from someone who gets paid $100 million a year to bounce a ball. So keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
She dismissed his comments as barely intelligible, mocked him for having left high school a year early, and said it was foolish to seek political wisdom from a man who gets paid a fortune to bounce a ball. Then she told him to keep his opinions to himself. She told him, in 3 words that instantly went around the world, to shut up and dribble. Stop and really absorb what that was.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble. I would definitely not do that. I mean too much to society. I mean too much to the youth. I mean too much to the to so many kids that feel like they don't have a way out and they need someone to help lead them out of the situation they're in.
That was the identical message Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had received in 1968, updated for a new century and compressed into a slogan: stay in your lane. You are a body, not a mind. We pay you to perform, not to think, and certainly not to speak. The phrasing was new. The demand was ancient.
The talking heads of our sport, oh my goodness.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Especially for you. I mean, you're in a much different situation than maybe any other human in history.
When I was at UCLA, all of my teammates were serious students. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And that was because Coach Wooden expected that. He wanted us to go to class and do well. He was just like a parent.
It was the same wall that had been thrown up in front of Alcindor when he was told America might not be for him. It was the same instinct that had painted Kareem as difficult for refusing to be silent. More than 50 years apart, 2 of the greatest players who ever lived heard the exact same command from the exact same place. And Kareem, of all people, understood immediately what he was watching, because he had heard the earlier version of that command with his own ears when he was younger than LeBron. This is the core of the warning. This is what Kareem spent decades trying to make people see: that the affection a country pours onto its black superstars is a transaction, and the terms are hidden in the fine print. We will love you for your body. We will fill arenas to watch what it can do, but the instant you reveal that there is a full human being in there, a man with convictions and grievances and a sense of justice, a man who has noticed how the world actually treats people who look like him, the affection curdles into something else. The cheering becomes a lecture. Entertain us, the country says, and do not remind us that you are a person. Kareem was the prototype. He ran into that wall first, decades before anyone had a hashtag or a highlight reel to circulate. And every time he wrote about it or spoke about it in the years that followed, he was, in effect, describing a trap that had not yet closed on his successor. He was telling us what was coming. LeBron James walked into that same trap, and the country reacted with such perfect, unthinking consistency that you could have predicted every beat of it in advance. Which is the entire point. Kareem did predict it, just by living it out loud and refusing to let us forget. Look even closer and the parallels multiply. Both men were relentlessly framed by the media as aloof, arrogant, unlikable in their primes. Kareem carried a reputation for being cold and standoffish with reporters, a label that trailed him for years and only softened long after he retired. once the culture finally caught up to the idea that a thoughtful, guarded, intensely intelligent man might simply not enjoy performing warmth for cameras. LeBron spent years being told he was a manufactured product, too calculated, too concerned with his brand, not authentic in the way we supposedly wanted our heroes to be. The accusation shifts with the era, but underneath it hums the same complaint. He is not grateful enough. He does not know his place. He asks too much for himself and gives too much lip. And here is where the word warning stops being a figure of speech and becomes almost literal. Because after Kareem finally set down the ball for good, he did not drift into golf and quiet retirement the way so many legends do. He picked up a pen. He became one of the most prolific athlete writers in American history, publishing book after book, writing columns for major magazines and newspapers.
I think seeing one of my books in print has given me as much joy and sense of achievement as winning an NBA championship. The books I've written are able to spread knowledge and inform people, and that will continue after I passed on.
Sitting for interview after interview, all of it circling the same handful of subjects: race, history, power. The specific, peculiar experience of being a black man whose body is celebrated while his mind is treated as a nuisance. Decade after decade, he documented the pattern in plain language, laid it out for anyone willing to read, and told the country in essay after essay exactly how it behaves toward its outspoken black stars. He was not just an example of the warning, he became its author in the most direct sense of the word. He spent the second half of his life writing the instruction manual for understanding what would happen to whoever came next. And then LeBron came next, and every page of that manual turned out to be accurate. That accuracy extends to a quieter injury both men suffered, one that has nothing to do with slogans or protests. Both of them were, in their primes, strangely underappreciated for how great they actually were. Kareem retired as the most decorated individual player the sport had ever produced. 6 championships and 6 most valuable player awards in the scoring record on top of it, and yet he is routinely left out of the casual conversations about the very best to ever play, edged aside by flashier, more marketable names. The skyhook was too clinical, his personality too guarded.
The greatest player I ever played against by far.
You miss Kareem?
Well, I miss not seeing him out there.
As a person.
As a person.
Yeah. He was a great player.
Oh, no question. The greatest.
Greatest player to ever play this game is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And we are dismissive of Kareem because every single stat that you throw up, he's at the top.
Just because he had a bad attitude, there are a lot of people who disrespect him.
I didn't let that happen. I was at that point. No, I kind of dealt with that. My first year playing varsity basketball, people sometimes the appearance of something, it really takes on a reality of its own that really isn't justified.
His brilliance too quiet to sell. LeBron, for all his fame, has spent his entire career being picked apart in a way few champions ever are. His rings weighed and discounted, his flaws magnified, an entire cottage industry devoted to explaining why he is not quite what the numbers say he is. 2 of the most productive players in the history of the game, and both of them somehow have to keep arguing for their own greatness. That is not a coincidence either. When a man refuses to flatter the audience tends to return the favor by refusing to fully credit him. There is a particular tax levied on the thinking athlete, and both of these men paid it in full. The sports world claims to prize intelligence, leadership, and character, right up until an athlete demonstrates those qualities in a direction the powerful did not authorize. Then intelligence becomes arrogance. Leadership becomes divisiveness. Character becomes attitude. Kareem was too smart to be comfortable, and he was punished for it. LeBron was too powerful to be controlled, and he was punished for it. The specifics differ. The machinery is identical, which brings us all the way back to that night in Los Angeles, and to the single detail that ties this entire story into a knot almost too neat to believe. When LeBron finally broke the record, Kareem was not bitter about it. He did not sulk or diminish the achievement. He stood at center court, handed the ball over.
I feel very happy for LeBron. It's something he's worked very hard for, and he's achieved it. And it wasn't easy. I have tremendous respect for what he does off the court. On the court, everybody sees that, but things he does off the court,
supporting his community.
And publicly recognized LeBron not only as a great scorer, but as a man carrying the same torch of activism that Kareem himself had carried his entire life.
A record that has stood for nearly 40 years, which Kareem, many people thought would never be broken. LeBron, you are the NBA's all-time scoring leader. Congratulations.
The old warrior looked at his successor and saw someone fighting the same fight, absorbing the same blows, refusing the same demand to be quiet. He was not just handing over a number, he was acknowledging a kinship that ran far deeper than points on a scoreboard. He was, in that quiet gesture, confirming everything this video has been building toward. These two men are chapters of the same story. Consider even their endings, or in LeBron's case, his refusal to end. Kareem played until he was 42 years old, an almost unthinkable length of career for a big man in his era.
Ultimate thrill for the Lakers. Kareem hits again with a skyhook. LA comes to Boston and wins the world title.
Dragging his body up and down the floor season after season. Still productive when players a decade younger had long since broken down. He redefined what longevity in the sport could look like. LeBron has done the same thing and then some, playing at an elite level deep into his late 30s and beyond.
LeBron trained down the track. Look out! Right here, spinning underneath.
Defying every expectation about when a body is supposed to quit. Treating the aging process itself as one more opponent to outwork. Both men turned durability into an art form. Both refused to leave on anyone's schedule but their own. And both, fittingly, held the very same crown. The all-time scoring record. That monument to showing up and delivering across an impossible span of years. The record did not just pass from one great player to another. It passed between two men who had structured their entire careers around the same stubborn refusal to fade. So what does it actually mean to say that LeBron James is what Kareem warned us about? It does not mean LeBron is a danger or a villain. It means something closer to the opposite. It means Kareem spent a lifetime describing a pattern in American life, a pattern about power and race and the price of an athlete's voice, and a large part of the public dismissed him as a scold who should have been grateful and quiet. Then that exact pattern reassembled itself around the next great one, in full view of everyone, decades later, without changing so much as a single moving part. LeBron is the proof that Kareem was never exaggerating and never complaining without cause. He is the evidence that the thing Kareem pointed at was real, structural, and durable enough to survive across half a century and land on the shoulders of the man who would eventually surpass him. The names change. The eras change. The technology and the slogans and the faces on the magazine covers all change. But the story does not. A black kid gets anointed impossibly young. He grows into a force so dominant that the institutions around him strain to contain him. He wins everything there is to win. And then, at the peak of his powers, he makes the fatal decision to be a whole person in public, to look at the country that cheers him and say that some of what it does is wrong. And in that instant, the country reveals the fine print it had been hiding all along. Be a body, do not be a man. Perform for us, and do not make us think about anything real. Kareem heard that message in 1968 and refused to obey it. LeBron heard the very same message in 2018 and refused to obey it too. He said, along with everyone standing beside him, that they would not shut up and dribble. That single act of defiance, echoing perfectly across two generations, is the whole reason these two lives fit together like a lock and a key. When Kareem lifted that basketball over his head and passed it to LeBron, most of the arena saw a scoring record changing hands. What was actually being handed over was heavier than any record. It was a responsibility, a burden, and an inheritance at the same time. The obligation to keep being great, yes, but also the obligation to keep speaking, to keep pointing at what is wrong, to keep paying the tax that America charges its most gifted black athletes for the crime of refusing to be silent. Kareem carried that weight for his entire life, and then set it, gently, into the hands of the one man alive who had already proven he could bear it. That is why the moment was so much bigger than basketball.
I just feel so good about the game. I feel like I owe it to the game. As long as I could go out and still play it at a high level, I feel like it's important for me to continue to inspire the youth, continue to inspire my teammates.
One player gives it all and, and leaves it all on the court. And then it's up to someone else to show how much a human being can achieve or not achieve. That's why we keep the records. And that's why people come to the games.
It was one prophet handing the scroll to the next. It was confirmation that the warning had come true, exactly as delivered. Kareem told us for 50 years what this country does to a great man who dares to think out loud. LeBron James is the living answer to that warning, the reminder that the pattern never died, and the promise that at least one more giant is willing to stand in front of it and refuse to move. If this look at the two men behind the throne meant something to you, do yourself a favor and subscribe, because the deeper you dig into the history of this game, the more you realize that the players we argue about on the court were always fighting a second, quieter battle off of it, and the ones we remember longest are the ones who never stopped fighting both.